fast recap on this. So this render is fine, and what I did, don't mind this splotching right here, but yeah, so this has no splotching, and what I did was pretty much, it's quite simple. You say ray trace off, and you clear the radius cache, and then you set it to always, then you bake the radiosity scene, and that's going to take you 2 minutes probably. And once that is, I don't have to activate animation here, which I thought I would have to, but I don't. You don't have to actually click on animation. So that could speed up, I mean, it might be a hack to speed up animation time, but I don't think it wouldn't work. You would still get splotching. So right now I'm just rendering the room in one for one animation, and then I'll add an animated character on top of this later on without any of these, without cached on. What you notice here is that this took 1.5 minutes, or yeah, 2 minutes, 1.5 minutes to create that GI cache, and that's for all 60 frames. The reason why that was possible because I used a frame step of 15. But even with a frame step of 1, it should be quite good. But I don't really need that since I'm using this technique of a panning camera without splotchy GI. But the most important thing was to turn this off, because or else you will have or else the GI will actually include reflections, and that will take much longer to calculate. So that's not really necessary at all, at least in 90% of the cases, or 95. Okay, so yeah, so we bake that, and what that means is that I can now set it to locked, and I can choose any frame, say frame 10. I can render that. Now it will not include the GI, it will only include the rays that we baked. And you can see it renders nicely. It takes 40 seconds to render, and I can move, and once that is done, I can move the time slider to frame 35, for example. So let's just finish this one. I'll move it to 25. So go like that, move it from 10 to 25, and render again. Run time should be very low now as well, about 40 seconds. And the reason why it stops here is because we actually got reflections going on. So these are blurred reflections, and that takes a long time to render, so that's why it kind of like stops in this area. So that has nothing to do with the GI being slow. It's actually the reflections putting on top of the GI that is causing a slowdown. Okay, that was a bit slow. 55 seconds. Well, I mean, not that slow, but yeah. So if I toggle these frames, you'll see that there's no splotching, or there is actually splotching, but it's very, very minimal. You can't really see it for cached GI, or this cached locked GI rather. But there will be a tiny bit of flicker for the reflection here, but that's, I could fix that by upping the shadow passes and the light passes in the render tab. Okay, so that's it really. That's how you go about that. You could take this wall here and just use a texture map instead, so you get a bit more clean look. But so we just fix that in Photoshop and fix that wall in Photoshop. But anyway, so that's it. That's the first render we will make. We will make camera panning, and that's over 60 frames. So that in full HD, that should take about 2 hours on this computer. That's a 1700 AMD. So 1 hour if you have a 3900. Actually, maybe a bit lower than that for full HD. But it's not finished, even though we get a nice render here. We have to add the animated character. So what we'll do is we'll add the character, the animated character, and it will move around the scene. And we will turn off cached, of course. So we will use regular GI, but that will create splotching, of course. So what we'll do to hack this is to have the character moving, but we will mask out that character moving around by rendering a limited region wherever that character is moving, and that should fix things. So you'll have to render this scene 2 times, one with lock GI and another time with standard GI, regular GI, with the character moving around, but you will only render an animated limited region. You could, of course, also render the character using, or render the whole scene and then mask the guy later on, but it's questionable if it's worth it, because you would get kind of high render times. Anyways, I think that's the way I would go about it, and it's not a perfect method, but I think it should work. This is a tough scene to render in LightWave 11.